I can see clearly now, the rain is gone. I can see all obstacles in my way. Gone are the dark clouds that had me blind. It's gonna be a bright, bright, sunshiny day. It's gonna be a bright, bright, sunshiny day. It's gonna be a bright, bright, sunshiny day.
You guys can sing that with us. Come on.
It's gonna be a bright, bright, sunshiny day. It's gonna be a bright, bright, sunshiny day.
I can see clearly now. What a beautiful rendition. Thank you so much. It's so good to see all of you. You are indeed beautiful on this beautiful September Sunday. Author Charles D. Lent said, quote, "We're all made of stories. You, me, everybody. The ones you can see and the hidden stories we keep secret inside. When they finally put us underground, the stories are what will go on. Not forever, perhaps, but for a time. It's a kind of immortality, I suppose. Bounded by limits, it's true, but then so is everything," end quote. Indeed, we are all made of stories, and the stories that we tell ourselves and others might just be the stuff of myths and fables. What is your story? What are the big sweeping tales that characterize who you are? If you had to summarize your life's journey, what might you say? Now, if you don't know your own story or find it difficult to articulate where you've been and your aspirations about the life ahead of you, it's likely that others will write the narrative for you. The question I would ask then, whose version of the story about you are you living today? Do you agree with what others say about you? And in your opinion, are they worthy storytellers? Because people will talk about you as if they know you, and they often get it wrong. And while they may think they know, they really don't know who you are and what you've been through. Perhaps you are a cancer survivor, or that you endured childhood sexual trauma, that you were kicked out of your childhood home because of your sexuality. Just because you have a little money now doesn't mean that you didn't have to struggle for every little bit you have, eating beans out of a can and popcorn for dinner. Oh, somebody knows what I'm talking about today. Last week, after a long life as head of state and the Commonwealth, Queen Elizabeth II passed away. There's been a lot of praise and recognition of the Queen's reign and legacy, and of course, there have been some dissenting voices who either criticize the Queen for not doing something, for doing something wrong, or for not doing enough of something right. But overall, it has been a bit strange for me listening to people who act like they personally knew the Queen. That at the time of her death, some have expressed deep love and genuine grief for her as if she was a close family member. What they knew was a story, but much of it was folklore and fairy tales intermingled with a bit of reality. We, in fact, know very little about her private life, about her joys and pains, heartbreaks, and the pressures that certainly came with being crowned at the age of 25. We can only imagine. But we should be careful about letting other people tell our stories. The only people I would trust enough to tell my story besides myself is someone who has goodwill for me, such as a loved one or a close friend. But then again, they're often the ones doing the most talking. During a family holiday several years ago, there was a falling out between my brother and my nephew. Both stopped talking to each other as a result. Now, there were several family members who witnessed the altercation, but my nephew's narrative and recollections of these incidents have kept growing and changing year after year, to the point that he keeps recalling events we all know didn't happen. And we no longer recognize the image of my brother that my nephew keeps describing. And I've been thinking to myself, what if our stories about others became better, kinder, and gentler with time? Wouldn't that be something? But I realize that a lot of people do this. Some of us tend to perpetuate our narratives and hold on to the meanings we initially assign to people and events. We forget that people change over time, and quite often for the better. We fall prey to our confirmation bias, and once we tell the story enough, we begin to believe in it ourselves, and it becomes a part of who we are, our identity, how we show up in the world, and how we come to view and treat others. We all know people who have said and believed things about us that were not true, at least from our perspective. And like most people, I used to get angry when other people said things about me that weren't true. I used to say as a fundamentalist Christian that I wasn't first delivered from sin as much as I was delivered from your opinion of me. Oh, y'all, I had some attitude back then. Sir Anthony Hopkins once said, quote, "My philosophy is, it's none of my business what people say of me and think of me. I am what I am and I do what I do. I expect nothing and accept everything, and it makes life so much easier," end quote. And the fact is, and I've said it before, someone might still be mad about something you said 20 or 30 years ago. You have changed a lot since then, and you don't even recognize the 25-year-old you, but they do, and the story they tell is frozen in time with no chance of changing. And that's not how we see ourselves. We are always changing. When it comes to politics, I consider myself more liberal or progressive. And I've heard things said about liberals that are not true about me, and such has caused me to think some things about conservatives that perhaps are not true about them, and thus conflict and polarization continue. For example, when people call me a groomer, I say, "Yo mama." No, I don't. No, I don't. But I'm not a groomer. However, the lies about us can enable us to clarify our truths. Right now, people are saying that because we support initiatives that teach our youth about sexual and gender diversity, and because we stand for an individual's right to self-identify, that we are somehow groomers. Or you may have heard that because we support a woman's right to choose, we are murderers. Some people can't see beyond their own bias or the belief that theirs is the only righteous way in worldview, and the rest of us are hellbound. order for their view of others, perhaps those like you and me, to exist and perpetuate, they have to continue telling the story about us. In other words, in order to justify their hostility, they belittle and dehumanize their ideological opponents. Friends, be aware that we do not do this ourselves. We must be aware that we don't do in like manner. Polarization happens when we prejudge people's motives, when we characterize them as, quote, quote, those kinds of people, when we conclude that there is no value in relating to them, when we refuse to allow space in our lives for others' stories through active listening, even if it's painful to hear. It will require us to listen in search of that one thread, that one common denominator among us that connects us together in possibility. It has been said that the shortest distance between two people is a story. And I'm not encouraging us to just put our heads in the sand as people attack us, nor am I saying just be happy and overly optimistic in the face of great challenges. But we must be aware that some people don't carry goodwill for us. We should all be vigilant, ready, and aware of what's going on around us and in our nation, but let us not become pessimistic about our future and what's truly possible, because possibility dispels despair. We must have hope. So how do you see yourselves today in relation to others? Are you seeing yourself and others clearly? Are you seeing people as they want to be seen? Someone said that faith and fear have one thing in common. They both require you to believe in something you can't see. Let's escape the vicious cycle of being stuck in a narrative that doesn't serve us well. Let's take stock of the conclusions that we draw. We get to write an alternative ending to this thing. I said we get to write an alternative ending to this thing. Author Karl Barth said, quote, although no one can go back and make a brand new start, anyone can start from now and make a brand new ending, end quote. We have a unique opportunity as creative beings to reimagine. We each have a part as the dreamers and writers of our own stories. We don't have to buy into what others say about us, that we are broken because of who we are, the color of our skin, or whom we love. We get to write the narratives of the stories we are connected to. People are already writing the epitaph of this nation, ready to deliver its eulogy, and I say hell to the no. It's not over. Because we have something to say. Imagine, if you will, a nation, our nation, being a more perfect union. All things are possible. And I'm calling on all of those who have creative vision or who might be willing to look deeply and reimagine. Because if you can see it, it is time that we reimagine the stories we tell about ourselves and others. We can revisit them and write a whole new character scene if need to. One that enables us to find peace and clarity and to act ethically and lovingly and to move in the direction of our vision and values. We can challenge and push ourselves into the maybe, the potentiality that things are not as bad as the constantly breaking news reports, or what we hear from our family members or coworkers about the state of things. We can look anew at our neighbors in our search for connection and commonality. We can see them as loving, see them as peaceful, see them as caring, and see them filled with goodwill. At times, imagining a new narrative where there is none can allow an opportunity to connect with another person's journey. While on overnight duty as a chaplain resident at the Veterans Affairs Center in Durham, North Carolina, before I'm relocated back here, I was called to the bedside of a veteran who was actively dying. He was in the hospice wing, and it was around 3 a.m. When I arrived, I was informed by the nurse that the veteran had no one. There was no family, no friends, no one to see him on his journey. I walked into that room. It was total dark. Dimmed. It was quiet, so quiet in that space. And all you could hear was his labored breathing. I looked around in the room and saw all of his things that would no doubt have been just donated to charity because there was no one to send it to. And I wanted desperately to connect with this man, but I knew nothing about him. So I wrote a poem in real time when I was there in that room, and it's entitled, As You Lie Dying. As you lie dying, I stand at your bedside, praying silently. I'm a caring stranger, disconnected from your story, your laughter unheard by me, your walk unknown by me, the color of your eyes, blue I see, as you open them so waitedly, perhaps glaring into the eyes of eternity. Does my presence evoke some past memory? What paths drew us together in this space? Who am I to share this sacred hour with you? I ask myself, how can I pray and find meaning in this moment? It feels odd to speak of your journey, but still I yield. Then the images begin to appear. We converse, you in your silence, me in my desire to know you. I see you. You're around the age of 3, playing with your favorite toy, a yellow truck. Your first day at school, I feel the butterflies you must have felt. Mom's there to see you off, smiling but apprehensive. Your first bicycle ride, you fall off and you skin your knee. Dad runs over, picks you up, and wipes away your tears. You are around 8, playing street ball with neighborhood kids. Some of those kids would become friends for life. Then there's the teenage you. You do all the things young men do, the good, the bad, and you make your share of mistakes too. But you ready yourself for the adventures of the life that is before you. I see you smiling, capped and gowned, lifting high your well-earned diploma. Mom, Dad, Grandpa, Grandma are there to celebrate your accomplishments. Your first kiss. When do you share it with? Who do you share it with? I ask, knowing you would never tell. Then you enlist. Dad is the proud one. Mom is a bit scared, but silently praying for your safety. You travel the world, returning with new insights and renewed faith. You fall in love with the most beautiful girl in the world. You propose. It is one of the happiest days of your life, the birth of your first child. I think I know how you felt. You finally understand what Mom and Dad have been telling you. You're proud, but also a little frightened by the little human you're holding. You retire. That day you feel relief, but also a little anxious. You get the news that you're facing a serious health challenge. And like everything you faced in life, you face it with strength, faith, and courage. And now the end is at hand. You and I are alone in this dimmed and quiet room. I see you, veteran. I see you fulfilled. I see you complete. I touch your hand. I think I know you, at least some of your story, of which I am now a small part. You take your last breath. I bid you farewell. After standing for a while, I sat in the chair next to his bed and began to think to myself, perhaps he was none of these things. Maybe he never married, but had a forbidden love that he couldn't speak of. Or perhaps he never danced or had loving parents. I didn't know what possible acts of heroism or potentially cruelty he might have committed while in service. There were only a few things that I knew about this man: his name, the last 4 of his social, and the fact that he at some point served in our country. And lastly, I knew for certain that he had lived. And I was privileged to share the most sacred of moments that connected us to the point where I could experience true compassion for a stranger. To this day, I don't know who else remembers him, but I do. I remember imagining the possibilities of a life well lived, well loved, one that would never be forgotten. And if none of what I imagined about him were true for him, it certainly created loving possibilities for myself. I can see clearly him living the best life, which inspires me to live mine. There's a great proverb that says, if you are intentional about living a meaningful life and leaving a legacy behind, you will never die. Instead, you break into 1,000 pieces, each which stays alive within the people whose lives you've touched along the way. Yes, we leave big and small impressions on people we meet in our lives. What will be said about the little impressions you and I left behind and the small gestures we made along the way? What will be said? What stories will be written? We must continue to open ourselves to the power that our stories bring. Indeed, our stories help us to connect and to coexist in a diverse and complex reality. When asked, we can say that we found commonality and community through our stories. You all have a testimony to tell today. So, my friends, today I encourage you, be healed by your story. Be restored by your story. Find hope in your story. But most of all, find acceptance of yourself in your story with all of its pain and suffering, all its joys and laughters, all its fears and doubts, and all its glory. And then share your story and validate the story of the many others in your life. They have a right to tell their story. And if you dare tell the story of your neighbor, tell it in a way that grants them grace and goodwill, that gives them the benefit of the doubt, regardless of whether they deserve it or not. Do it because we would want the same shown toward us. Do it because everyone needs someone to root for them. Do it because of your love that is so far beyond belief. In this way, the story will not just be ours alone. May we each be fully alive today and all the days of our lives. May it be so. Amen.
Please rise as you're able. Let's sing together. Love will guide us. The words will be on the screen. Hope inside us will lead the way. On the road from grief to giving, love will guide us through the hard night. Let's sing it together.